Countdown day 17 to my Vegas trip. Paying the tax man and the next recession. You know, back in the stock market this week dropped $800, and I think it also dropped $300. And I've also heard rumors that the recession is coming. You know, back in 2008, that's when the world really ended. You know, back in 2008, we had thousands of foreclosures, and I remember back during the 2008 session, I lost two duplexes because I was trying to be a real estate mogul. And I had over $14,000 a line of credit I took out because I thought the tenants would pay the rent, which my tenants educated me that they don't pay the rent. Okay, let me get you where it's going. Back in 2008, that's when we thought the world was really going to end. You know, you had Bear Stearns, like multi-billion-dollar companies going out of business. You know, thousands of banks, credit unions went out of banking. You had people being laid off by the thousands. And I remember, like, you see all these houses being built right now. Back then in 2008, 2009, there were like vacant houses everywhere. People were just squatting in houses, and houses were going into foreclosures, and you couldn't even get people out of houses. So don't get too spooked by this by you hear things about recession. And I remember the three mistakes I made during that they call it the Great Recession or something. There's the Great Depression, and we called ours during that year the 2008, 2009. That's what we call like the Great Recession, when like the stock market dropped $2,000 or $3,000, and car companies were going to try to get companies like federal bailouts. And the biggest thing that happened back then is what I want you guys to be aware of is people just didn't have cash. People lived on their credit cards like they're doing now, buying the nice cars, buying the expensive houses, and you were able to get credit to at least tide you over to where you could get some actual cash coming in. Well, back during that 2008, the Great Recession, as we call it, is one thing is people just didn't have enough cash to get them through the process where they could get the loan approved to get the credit. So basically, it wasn't so much it wasn't a recession, it was more like a credit crunch because people were just basically living credit to credit and getting more credit to get to pay their bills. But then when the companies found out that these credit things that people were giving them were bouncing, that's when you had like a problem start. And I remember during the Great Recession, I was trying to remember what the three mistakes I made. The first mistake I made was I bought a bunch of duplexes and I raised the rent too quick. I assumed like my parents taught me to pay my bills. Well, I didn't realize a majority of people don't think they should pay their bills. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two was my grandmother had passed away, and I let my emotions get in the way, and I let my uncle and a family friend stay in the house. My uncle wasn't working, and the family friend, I thought she was working. She was staying with my grandmother and helping her out. I thought she had money, and all I asked them to do was pay $200 a month on our house, and I would cover the rest. But of course, they did not pay the $200. And the third mistake I made during the Great Recession was, what did I do? Oh, I started using credit cards too much. Because I fell into the trap thinking like if I get to use the line of credit, then I would be able to get the tenants to pay. And that was the third biggest mistake I made. So mistake number one was I bought the duplexes, raised the rents too quickly. Mistake number two was I should have gotten rid of like the uncle and the family friend living in the house and just sold the house. And number three was I just used that line of credit too much, hoping that the tenants would pay, which they didn't. So when I hear like this $800 stock market and I hear these fears of recession, I always go back to like the Great Recession of 2008. Because back then I even took like a salary cut of 15%, and I was like scrambling to find like a job. There was like everyone was competing for jobs. I mean, companies were going out of business left and right. I used to work at a martial arts studio. We had over 150 students. As soon as the Great Depression 2008, our enrollment was dropped in half. People stopped coming because people basically didn't have money. So I want you to start doing, when you hear these things about recession, start looking for ways just to keep a little extra cash on hand. That's one thing I did learn as we started to come out of that recession, like toward the 2011, 2012, was like if you had just a little bit of money, I mean, you were key. I mean, cash. I don't mean credit. If you mostly credit was okay, but mostly cash was king back there. You could get anything that you wanted. And as I look back on it, like my student loan was probably over $94,000 back then in 2008. And now, 2019, I've been able to get it under 40,000. And I look back like, well, during that period of that student loan, like what was really going on? I remember I had bought like a Beamer. The Beamer was paid off, so the Beamer wasn't the problem. The problem was like the gas was $5 a gallon. So when you're driving a Beamer 75 miles each direction to work or to some place, and gas is $5, that hurts, man. You may be looking cool, but you're losing money. So I remember that was like a big problem, and it was just like hard to get like loans. Banks were like strict with money. So I want you to look, when you hear all these things about recession, what the recession is telling you is if you don't have enough cash and then you don't know how to transition or you have any sales skills, then you should be afraid, because there could be a corner in your future. I mean, a corner where you're standing there begging for money and people won't even give you money. And like I was just at an event in Chino, and the houses were going for over $600,000. And you can sell like the houses are only really being supported by fulfillment, aka, you know what I call them, warehouse jobs. There was a Yokohama, Amazon, and another couple of companies. You know, a lot of these people are working at these warehouses, and I'm just thinking, you know, when the next recession hits, our robot overlords are going to be implemented in all these warehouses, and then some of the areas that you're in, like Chino and these nicer areas that you've been going through, are going to start looking like San Bernardino again. Low money, a lot of unemployment. And I don't want that to happen to you. So what I want you guys to do is like have that extra cash flow at hand. Cash is king.